The fire was going well, or so I thought. Good coals, steady heat, the kind of fire that settles a camp down and makes the night feel manageable.
I'd been sitting beside it for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the smoke had a different quality to it.
Not wood smoke, something sharper underneath it, almost chemical.
The way a hardware store smells in summer. My eyes started watering before I could place it.
I moved upwind, and the feeling eased.
Moved back, and it returned. I looked at what was burning and saw nothing obviously wrong. A mixed pile, some of it grabbed from a stack near an old outbuilding on the property. Dry enough, burning fine, but the smoke itself was wrong, and I'd learned by then to trust that feeling before I learned what caused it. That's where this story starts.
Not with what I found that night, but with why it took me so long to look.
Most people who burn fires assume one thing: dry wood burns clean. You hear it constantly. Season your wood, let it dry out, and you're good. And for straightforward, well-sourced timber, that's mostly true. But the assumption quietly expands until people stop thinking about it at all. Any dry wood, any old board, anything that will catch. The frontier taught people to burn what was available, and modern campers and homesteaders carry that assumption forward without carrying forward the knowledge that went with it. Old mountain men knew their trees. They knew their land. They knew which thickets had old wire in them, which fence lines had been treated, which driftwood came from where. The knowledge and the habit stayed connected. At some point, the habit survived the knowledge. That's when fires started going wrong in ways people couldn't explain. What I've learned to do before any fire goes into an enclosed space is ask myself 4 questions. Where did this wood come from? What's been growing on it or near it? What might have touched it chemically, mechanically over decades before it reached my hands? And where is the smoke going? A wood stove in a tight cabin needs a working flue and airflow. A fireplace in a building that's been sealed against the cold needs checking before the season starts. A tent stove needs a quality pipe and a door cracked open. The fire is the easy part. Managing what the fire produces takes more consideration than most people give it. Now I'll tell you what was burning that night. I went back the following morning and looked at the stack I'd pulled from. Underneath the clean split oak and hickory, someone had tossed in several short lengths of old board from a collapsed outbuilding on the property. Gray, weathered, unremarkable looking. I pulled one out and looked at the end grain in daylight, faint greenish cast in the wood fiber. Old pressure-treated stock, probably from the 1980s or earlier. Had been sitting in that pile for who knows how long, dry as the rest of it, burned exactly like regular wood. The only thing different was the smoke. That's the lesson I keep coming back to. Fire doesn't discriminate. It burns what you give it and returns to the air everything that was in the wood. The smoke doesn't warn you that something is wrong until the damage is already underway, and even then, the warning is subtle. A sharpness, a strange color in the flame, a headache that builds slowly, a throat that won't settle. By the time the symptoms are obvious, you've already been breathing it for a while. Safe firewood means knowing its origin. It means checking the bark for what's growing on it. It means looking at cut ends for unusual color. It means considering what the wood's history might have been. Was it from a standing tree you cut yourself, or did it come from a pile beside someone else's shed? It means knowing where the smoke from your fire will travel and whether the space you're heating has the ventilation to handle it. Before your next fire, pick up one piece of your firewood and genuinely ask yourself where it came from, not as a formality, as a real question. If you can't answer it, that piece stays outside. Tell me in the comments, which of these surprised you most? Which one had you never considered before? There's no shame in not knowing. These are the things that used to get passed down around a fire between men who'd learned them the hard way. That chain got broken somewhere. We're reconnecting it. If you want more of this kind of knowledge, subscribe and stick around. Fire has kept people alive since the beginning. What you put into it has always mattered just as much as whether it lit. The first category of danger is the one people least expect because it comes from nature itself. Poison ivy doesn't announce itself when it dies. The vine that climbs an oak all summer, spreading across the bark, goes brown and dry in the fall right along with everything else. Cut that oak down, split it, stack it, and you've got firewood. You've also got poison ivy wood fiber and urushiol-coated bark wrapped throughout your pile. When you burn it, you're not getting a rash. You're inhaling the same compound that raises welts on skin, dispersed through smoke and entering your lungs and eyes directly. I've known people hospitalized from campfire smoke and only figured out afterward that there had been ivy on the wood. The fire destroyed the evidence. Their airways received what was left. Poison oak works the same way, and poison sumac, a shrub or small tree, not a vine, common in wet and swampy ground across the eastern half of this country, is considered by many to be more potent than either. You can stack it with clean firewood and never know it's there. Dried and dead, it looks like any other piece of brush. The rule I follow is simple. If I don't know what's been growing around the wood and I can't clearly see the bark and check it, that wood doesn't go anywhere near an enclosed fire. Outside, in a large open fire in reasonable amounts, the risk is lower. In a cabin stove, a tent with a small opening, a fireplace with a tight flue, it concentrates. Oleander is one that people underestimate because they don't think of it as firewood at all. It's a landscape shrub, but it grows across the southern United States. It dies back and freezes, people cut it and pile it, and it ends up mixed into burn piles. Every part of oleander is toxic. Leaves, bark, stems, sap. It contains glycosides that interfere with heart function. Burning it releases those compounds. I'm not saying a branch in a bonfire will kill you before you can stand up. I'm saying the dose matters, the ventilation matters, and the amount of time you sit in that smoke matters. An evening around a fire with oleander in the pile, indoors or in poor ventilation, is a problem. I've never made that mistake, but I've spoken to men who have, and they described it as a sickness that took days to fully clear. Headache, nausea, weakness, the sense that something was wrong that they couldn't identify. There's a plant worth mentioning that most people have heard of but wouldn't recognize near their wood pile: black locust. The wood itself burns beautifully once seasoned, hot, long-lasting, one of the best hardwoods available. But the bark and leaves contain toxins, and fresh green wood produces more concerning smoke. The wood's reputation as excellent firewood leads people to burn anything that came off a locust without checking its condition. Dry, well-seasoned locust is generally considered safe. Green wood, bark-heavy pieces, and anything with leaves still attached. Approach with more care, especially indoors. But natural wood was only half the problem. The smoke that worried me most across my years in the field didn't always come from a tree. Pressure-treated lumber is probably the most common dangerous material in American wood piles that people don't think twice about. Older pressure-treated wood, anything manufactured before about 2004, was preserved with arsenic-based compounds, chromated copper arsenate. Burn that wood and you burn off arsenic-laden smoke. Even newer pressure-treated lumber uses alternatives that aren't harmless when combusted. It's green-tinted in many cases, though not always. It doesn't smell different from regular wood until it starts to burn, and sometimes not even then. People clean out old barns, pull down old decks, split up old fence posts and stack them for winter. The wood is dry, it's there, it burns. And then they sit in a small cabin with a hot stove and wonder why they have a headache that won't leave. I learned to look at what I couldn't see in the wood rather than what I could. What's the age of this board? Was it in contact with the ground? Does it have a uniform color that doesn't match plain timber? Does the cross-section show a greenish tint in the grain? Those questions don't guarantee you an answer, but they're the first gate before the fire. Painted and stained wood introduces a separate problem. Old paint, particularly anything applied before the 1980s, may contain lead. Burning painted boards releases that lead into the smoke. Modern paints are less dangerous in that specific way, but burning any painted surface produces compounds that aren't present in clean wood combustion. Stained wood, varnished wood, lacquered furniture broken up for a bonfire, all of it releases something the smoke wasn't supposed to carry. I think about old cabins where people burned trim and floorboards through hard winters, burning beautiful painted wood without knowing what it cost them over months of exposure. The danger in a single fire is low. The danger across a season or a decade compounds. Plywood is made with adhesives. Particle board and MDF, medium-density fiberboard, are manufactured from wood fiber held together with formaldehyde-based resins. When you burn them, those resins combust and produce formaldehyde gas and other aldehydes. Construction scraps, old furniture broken into pieces, cabinet material pulled from a renovation. This is what ends up in fire pits across the country on weekends because it looks like wood, it was wood once, and it burns. The flame doesn't care what's in it. Your lungs receive the difference. Years later, I smelled that same warning from a beach fire someone had started with driftwood. Saltwater driftwood has a particular problem that most people never consider. Wood that spent time in the ocean absorbs salt into its fibers. Sodium chloride, burning in a fire, produces small amounts of dioxins and other chlorinated compounds. The fire will sometimes burn with a faint yellow tinge in the flame. The health risk from an occasional beach fire is considered low, but burning large amounts of driftwood in an enclosed space, a cabin, a camp stove, a tent with poor airflow, concentrates whatever those flames are carrying. I've walked past beach fire pits in the morning and been able to smell the difference from 10 feet out. Something slightly harsh underneath the smoke. It's subtle, but it's there. Old fence posts and railroad ties deserve a category of their own. Railroad ties, cross ties, sleepers were traditionally soaked in creosote for preservation. Creosote is a coal tar derivative loaded with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Burning even a small amount in an enclosed fire fills the space with carcinogenic smoke. Old fence posts may have been treated with anything: pentachlorophenol, creosote, copper naphthenate, or whatever the prevailing preservative was when they were installed. You cannot determine the treatment by looking at the wood. You cannot smell it reliably when the wood is cold. Once it's burning, you have your answer, and by then you're already in the smoke. Demolition wood in general carries these risks amplified. Old buildings contain generations of treatment, coating, repair, and contamination. A board pulled from a 1950s garage wall may have been painted, repainted, treated against insects, exposed to motor oil, insulated with asbestos nearby, and then dried out for decades. There is no way to know its history by looking at it. I have a rule for demolition wood that I've kept for 30 years. I don't burn it inside. If it goes in any fire at all, it goes in a well-ventilated outdoor burn where I'm not sitting in the smoke column. Often it doesn't go anywhere near a fire. Mold changes the conversation again because it moves the danger from the wood source to the wood's condition. Logs stored in wet conditions develop fungal growth. Some of that growth is relatively benign. Some molds produce mycotoxins, compounds that, when disturbed, irritated, or burned, become a respiratory hazard. Burning heavily molded wood indoors produces spores and toxins along with smoke. The wood may be technically dry by the time you burn it, which masks the problem. I've split open logs that looked fine outside and found deep fungal discoloration all the way through. That wood doesn't go indoors. And then there is the problem of ordinary wood. Good wood, clean wood, hardwood from a tree burned badly in a space with poor ventilation. Green wood doesn't fully combust. Incomplete combustion produces carbon monoxide. You cannot smell it. You cannot see it. In an open fire outdoors, the amounts disperse harmlessly. In a cabin with a tight stove, a small tent with a wood-burning insert, a poorly drafted fireplace in a building someone has weatherized aggressively, the carbon monoxide accumulates. Wet wood produces far more of it than dry wood. Soft woods produce more than hardwoods in similar conditions. People fall asleep near the fire and don't wake up. It is not a dramatic process. It is quiet, and it presents like tiredness.